been great to be here. I'm a guest. This is my first time on campus. Many of you I just met over the last couple of days. And there's a Greek word hospitality, is made up of two words, philo, xenos, love of the stranger. And I want to thank Valparaiso for welcoming this stranger into your family. This morning I want to talk about something that I think has affected all of us, something that we read about every day and some of us deal with every day in some way. When I read the program and when I read the invitation that I received by email, what I understood was that it was all about how digital connectivity has been transforming higher education. At least that's the way I read it. And although there's precious little scholarship to look at how these dynamics are affecting people in everyday life, and there's an incredible amount of speculation, I, like you, have lived through a revolution. We've seen an incredible transformation, not just in our institutions, but in our homes. And I want to talk about these issues because I care about them, because they're things that I use and are a part of my pedagogy and scholarship. But I also use them because my 8-year-old now is asking for a cell phone. And, you know, my wife complains about the internet not working because then she can't do anything. I mean, we are very dependent on these devices, and our students bring them with us in their classrooms, overseas and abroad. But I bring it everywhere I go. In order to find my hotel, I used my GPS device. In order to figure out who Joe Creech was. I Googled him. 90% of the interaction that I've had in relation to this conference has been online. And I suspect that for most of you, you Googled me. Figure out who this guy was. Is he worth listening to, and do I have to be here at 8:30 in the morning? So thank you for coming. I'm not nearly the historian that many of you are, and many of you may quibble over the nuances of what I try to bring to you today. I want to acknowledge that there are a number of different issues that we could talk about today, and that there are a number of different implications that I simply won't have the time or really the expertise to give you. Today what I want to do is I want to suggest to you that what we have are two different moral orientations that are not converging but clashing, and that the unanticipated resolution of this clash is what's determining the future of higher education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accentuate two different moral codes. I'm going to accentuate them. I'm not going to try to exaggerate them as much as use sort of a Weberian ideal type to try to give you a sense of what these things are, both to show what I think is fundamental to all of the debates, the contentions, as well as the enthusiasms of what we see in these discussions, and to try to put some lines down for what would be helpful in how to think about these issues for the future. And it's very hard to talk about these things when the ground under our feet continue to shift. So I'm asking your permission to accentuate two moral codes, or two idealized orientations, which are forceful tensions that I believe are bringing us to our collective future. And I hope this stimulates further discussion. I went to college at Pepperdine University. And at that time, computers meant these large refrigerator-sized mainframe machines. They had created a new building, especially designed for the computer, and was specially housed with these computer operators. And these were very impressive. We would get a tour of these, and this is something that you'd get on the campus tour. Alumni would be very proud of this. But at that time, what was really impressive to me was this microcomputer. That was really cool. And it was produced by IBM and Apple and K-Pro. Do you remember K-Pro? One of the business. And educational institutions became the sites for exclusive contracts for new computer labs. And these computer labs became a must-have. And I quickly became infatuated with computers. I was fortunate that even though I couldn't afford one, my roommate could. And he had a portable computer.
That's what it was my dissertation on.
Compact 286 dual disk drive, baby. I know, you wanted one too. This wasn't a portable, we called it a luggable. And we would carry it around and everything. And I would just beg Kirby if I could use it. So I would play Zork and pinball. And then of course I would write my paper in WordStar. Do you remember WordStar? VisiCalc. So these were programs that I used at the time. And he was very clear with me at one day because he saw how much I loved this thing. And he looked at me and he said, "It's not the computer, Gerardo, it's the modem."
Wow.
Now this was back in like 1986. And Kirby was so right. Because, you know, it was hard to get excited about a modem, something that you couldn't see. And also, dial-up at 9600 baud really didn't excite me until I discovered electronic bulletin boards. And that's opened an entire world of people and communities that I had affinity with, even if I'd never met them. And I started realizing that there were files and that there was information, and then there were any number of things that all of a sudden, if I could dial it up, I could have access to it. And it became a nearly unlimited realm of opportunity for relational connection and satisfying every curiosity I ever had. I'm an intensely curious person. This suited me very well. It is about the modem, because for the purposes of our conversation today, the most transformative technological change is not computing. It is the connectivity that's happening between computers, the digital connectivity. The connection between people with computers is the transformation. And that's why it matters, especially for us in higher education. Kirby's right. It's not the computer, Gerardo. It's the modem. And I continued to discover that as I got into America Online. I was asking the tech guy as he was helping us set up, I said, have you ever heard of this? No. You know, how old are you? I was hoping he was like 13, you know. 21. AOL was huge for me. It was through AOL that I discovered chat rooms. It was through AOL that I booked my hotel room for my honeymoon in Rome. It was a way of finding out about books that I hadn't heard of. It introduced me to the stock market. It gave me my first email account. My parents are from Cuba, so that was CubanBlood@AOL.com. And as other friends began to get email accounts, all of a sudden I had another way of beginning to interact, something that we've become amazingly dependent on. But I also was on it early enough that they had a little button that said World Wide Web coming soon. Because at the time, the stream of information was something that needed to be translated, which is why you needed a browser. And they were desperately working to put this thing together. And so I was there and clicked on that link. The very first day, the World Wide Web was available. So I've lived through this. And the point of it is that I was now connected to everyone with an online connection, both in terms of information and communities of interest. Strangers became acquaintances, and the digital world became a chain of relationships. The internet then is no longer a limited arena though. This is what's really important. See, if you remember, there was a time when the banks began to create networks amongst themselves. And then the federal government and the national, local governments began to create computer networks. Our phone companies were creating networks. They were creating networks in order to facilitate administrative decision-making, sharing of different kinds of decisions, you know, trying to reduce paperwork. There were a lot of things about these intranets. And then they started connecting them together. And so for a time I'd go, all right, if I wanted to find out the balance on my bank, I would have to get into my bank. And if I needed something else, I would get there, or I'd have to walk over physically in order for them to work through things. And the internet really was just a supplement to my life. It was just an extra. It was interesting. It was something you'd go on every now and then to check on something. But the internet has become far more than a limited arena. It's far more than just a curiosity. The internet is no longer isolated data and relationships. Networks are not isolated. Online connections have become a necessity. Between bulletins and immersive social environments, we are not in isolated islands of data and relationships. And the possibility of connectivity, I think, is now assumed. People say, what's your email address? I have stacks of business cards that I no longer give away. Nobody wants them. People say, how do I reach you? I say, just Google me. I'm about as easy to find as anyone. You'll find me in 5 or 6 different ways. I'm not hard to find. It's very easy now, and we assume that if we don't know what time the store closes, we can look it up on the internet. Our phones have allowed us such amazing ranges that we now say to people, just text me. This is how we keep up with our kids. Now my colleagues are texting me. I'm trying to stem the tide for my students texting me. But I'm now able to be connected. My wife wished me well this morning, but she didn't call me. And email's a little clunky. She sent me a text. So the possibility is now assumed, and it's not just crazy hipsters. 72% of professors use course management systems, but it's not just that. They use it to communicate with colleagues. We submit our grades online. We distribute reports of different sorts. We post syllabi and study content. We submit articles and entire book manuscripts. Now Oxford University Press will send me an email. Would you like to review it? I email back. Yes. They say, here it is, along with an attachment. I review it. Please send your comments with an attached file. I do. They email back. Would you like money or books? I email back. Books. And here they are. That's right. Sometimes ebooks, I still like the physical thing. But how did I get invited to this conference? I was in class, and I was looking at the computer in our smart classrooms, and I get this email from someone I'd never heard of, named Joe Creech, with a very flowery, very nice, very flattering, I don't know how I could have said no, saying, we'd like to invite you to our 20th anniversary national conference. We think you'd be great. So I emailed. Thank you very much. Happy to be there. We had so many email exchanges, I had to beg for, well, I didn't beg, but I said, Joe, maybe it would be good for us to talk by phone. He said, well, I guess that'd be a good idea. The world has changed. We do a tremendous amount of our academic work online. Even though many of us can sort of moan and complain about digital connectivity and our students being so dependent on it, and can't they live life without it, and we don't need these things, but my professional life is dependent on the internet.